So I want to welcome to the podium our first speaker, the Deputy Director of the Australian National University's Climate Change Institute, Frank Iozzo. Frank is one of Australia's leading environmental and resource economists, specialising in the economics and policy of climate change.
Good evening. Thank you everyone for coming. It's great to see so many people interested in these issues here tonight. So apologies first of all, I am an economist, so what I say might be tinted a little bit through my specific ways of viewing the world. Now, what I'm trying to do in my 12 minutes that I've been allocated is to do a bit of scene setting on climate change impact, adaptation and development, and in turn what that might mean coming back to Australia. First of all, climate change as a core issue for economic development. Climate change no longer is seen as a green issue, okay? It's also a green issue, but it is seen as an issue for the fundamentals of prosperity and economic development. It's symptomatic, actually, that over the last few years, climate change talks at the international level are more and more conducted between finance ministers rather than between ministers of environment. So that signifies a shift, and on the whole, it is probably a very, very positive shift, because what it means is that we've got a much better chance of getting significant resources into this field. Now, we trace back when it was first widely recognized and acknowledged that climate change is an issue for development. What you come across is the Stern Review, the UK government commissioned review by Lord Nicholas Stern into climate change. And he showed that climate change really can put development at risk. It can put the gains that have been made in terms of poverty alleviation and improving people's livelihood at risk, because it affects agriculture, it affects food security ultimately, it affects health, it affects infrastructure. All of those things are at risk from climate change. But conversely, of course, development, economic development, is also what drives climate change, what drives greenhouse gas emissions, and what is ultimately the cause of the problem that we're facing. In the Australian context, it was the Garnaut Climate Change Review that really drew out these issues, not just for Australia, but also for our neighbours in the region. And what Professor Garnaut concluded after the many studies that were done for the Garnaut Review is that Australia is most likely among the developed countries, the country most at risk from climate change impacts going into the future. But it's important to note that we're talking among developed countries. It is very, very likely the developing countries that are actually a lot more at risk from climate change. It's really the poor that are most exposed to climate change. It's the poor countries that are most vulnerable. And within each country, it is the poor sections of society that are most vulnerable. If you want to see that in a concrete sense, think of increased flooding in the great cities of Asia. Okay, we can already see that in Jakarta, for instance, a country where I do a fair bit of work. Flooding in Jakarta increases. It's also to do with deficient water management, but it's also to do with a shift in weather patterns that result in shorter, more intense rainy seasons, and hence more intense rainfall events. So who's exposed to this? Well, it's the poor people down the river who live in the shacks. Who's most vulnerable to it? Again, it's the same people who haven't got the money, or who haven't got the insurance to rebuild their houses after the flood has hit. And again, it's those people who have the least opportunity to adapt to climate change, to react to it and change their way of life by moving somewhere higher up, because higher up is more expensive and you can't afford it. Okay? The same pattern is repeated again and again in sectors like agriculture, fisheries, health, infrastructure. And women are very often more affected by men, and I'm sure that Aka and Deepa are going to talk about that aspect a bit more. Second point I want to make is climate-proofing development. That's ultimately the aim that the development community is talking about here. So it's about preparing for the impacts and preparing for the risks. A lot of this is actually about risk management. We're not certain about what climate change impacts will be coming our way, and risk management really reigns supreme. Climate scientists are actually more and more realizing that spaceship Earth is not really a linear system. When we talk about global warming and when we talk about sea level rise, when we talk about impacts, usually what's done is people put up a graph with a kind of a sort of a line going up, okay? Some impact goes up or some availability of water goes down, whatever. Nature actually doesn't work like that mostly, because if you look at the graph, and maybe I should have shown that one, of polar sea ice, all the projections kind of have polar sea ice cover going down as sort of more or less linear line. What the actual observation over the last 10 years or so is going down a linear line and suddenly it drops off and it's on the way to zero, okay? It's not a linear system. Mother Nature has surprises in store for us, and we're drawing out those surprises by pumping CO2 into the atmosphere. So what that means for adaptation is that we shouldn't just be preparing in developing countries or in developed countries. We shouldn't just be preparing for the expected mean. We should be preparing for unexpected surprises. Now, how do you go about adaptation? Very often, thankfully, it's actually going hand in hand with the standard development agenda, okay? You want to create more robust economic livelihoods, you want to have better health systems, more responsive emergency management systems, that kind of thing. You want to simply do things better, okay? And that'll also help you manage climate change impacts. Other times it will require dedicated investments, okay? So for instance, flood-proofing cities from seawater incursion under sea level rise scenarios. That in most instances actually requires bricks and mortars and major investments. Same goes for roads, for electricity grids, etc., etc. A third area that will be particularly difficult to manage in all likelihood will be resettlements. It is already clear that there's many, many millions, perhaps tens of millions of people, particularly in Bangladesh and Vietnam, that live in very low-lying areas that are subject to sea level rise and water incursion. And ultimately, for many, many of these people, there will be no alternative but resettlement. But obviously, there isn't a ready place for everyone to go where there aren't already people who are drawing on economic resources. And again, economics comes into it because not all migration is driven just by physical factors like you can't live anymore where you used to live. It's also driven simply by the loss of economic opportunity. Okay, so if rainfall patterns shift, then agricultural growing patterns shift, then people will shift. Okay, so there's some really, really big questions to come to terms with, both within developing countries, but also across boundaries. And the question is really how to manage this process without running the risk of major social conflict. Okay. And the security community is increasingly realizing that climate change-induced movement of people is perhaps one of the great threats going forward. And of course, in my little list of countries, I should have mentioned first and foremost the low-lying Pacific Island countries.